Welcome back to Observer AM. Thank you for staying with us. It's now, what time is it? It's 11 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour. We're going to be talking with two ladies, and they're representing, so to speak, integrated health outreach. Our guest this morning, we have Dr. Nicola Bird. She's a social and climate specialist and the executive director of Integrated Health Outreach, Inc., IHO, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to improving well-being with an emphasis on supporting women and other vulnerable communities in Antigua and Barbuda and the Caribbean region. IHO focuses on social, emotional, environmental, and community wellness, empowering vulnerable communities to find solutions to climate change, economic instability, gender-based violence, and social emotional challenges. Dr. Bird is a graduate of the University of Toronto. Good morning, Nicola. How are you?
I forgot to unmute.
Oh, there you go.
Good morning, Barbara. Thank you for having us here.
The Zoom
It's a
crime
pleasure.
that everybody commits at some point in time, no matter how hard we try to remember. Not a problem at all. There we go. Christine Young is a sustainability consultant with over 15 years' experience in a number of sectors, including tourism, agriculture, education, energy, and health. Christine has completed several projects throughout the years with international organizations such as the Inter-American Development Bank, the Organization of American States, and the Food and Agriculture Organization, with a high focus on climate change adaptation, renewable energy, sustainable livelihoods, and sustainable destinations. Good morning, Christine. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Barbara. I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?
I am well. I am well. Great having you both here on the program. We're going to jump straight into things. Nicola, before we jump into our discussion about the ecosystem based adaptation, the EBA project, I believe that this falls under the umbrella of projects being worked on by Integrated Health Outreach, the IHO. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about
IHO.
IHO if you can.
Oh, I was jumping in
Okay.
ahead. Yeah.
That's okay.
Well, IHO is a not-for-profit organization, and we are a wonderful team of fantastic nationals really working together to address our different social concerns. And because we're a wellness oriented organization, it includes multiple platforms: environmental, community, social, mental health, and we do focus a lot, and our main focus is vulnerable groups, women, youth, and so we do a lot of work specifically in those areas. And so we have several projects, you know, in the pot, and this particular project, funded by the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund in partnership with International Climate Initiative, the Nature Conservation, just wanted to big up our donors for sure, nuclear safety and consumer protection, is a regional project. It is being implemented in Antigua and Barbuda, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic. And so we learn from each other. It's cross bi-directional, and we are working together to really address the concerns that we have in terms of climate change and the impact on our ecosystems and our sustainable livelihoods as well as communities. And we're working in Antigua and Barbuda in partnership with National Park Authority, an amazing partner for us, certainly. And on their side, they are addressing the ecosystem based issues in terms of uh, coral and mangrove restoration, and we are addressing livelihoods and sustainability in terms of livelihoods as a result of the impacts of climate change.
Okay, that's a mouthful. We're going to break it all down. There's so much there, and we have the time to discuss it all and to help everyone to understand what that's all about. So we're going to come back and get some of those bits and pieces that you mentioned and understand them better as we go forward. Christina, you're a sustainability specialist. What does that mean? First of all, what does that mean?
Okay, thanks for that question, Barbara. So sustainability is really we've moved away from focusing just on the environmental aspect of things, which is looking at the natural ecosystems, natural environments, water, things like water, energy, and so forth. So sustainability really encompasses three pillars. And I'm a lecturer as well, so I always tell my students, if it's one thing you have to remember, it's the three components of sustainability, which is the environmental aspect, the social aspect, and then the economic aspect. So what I basically do is I support organizations, support projects such as this one to act sustainably. So that involves different things like research, developing programs, planning, training, you name it. And I work with a variety of organizations as well, nonprofits, governments, private sector.
Okay, so specifically to this project, where do you fit into what's going on with this project?
So I'm the vulnerability assessment specialist on the project. So I support in terms of the facilitating a couple of things. First of all, doing the research, the hands on the ground. Well, we're all on the ground, actually, facilitating, reaching out to the stakeholders in particular. So we have a variety of stakeholders which we have reached out to. It's thus far, so I've done quite a bit of stakeholder consultations. We're also doing focus group consultations, which is just a number of persons within the same field, like, the taxi drivers and so forth. And then we had a workshop both on the 1st of May and also the 13th of June. So that was really good. We got some vital information because with these projects, we wanted to be extremely consultative. So we are not sitting down behind a desk, to write this. We are absolutely involving the entire community, from the farmers, the fishermen, those who are involved in tourism in that area, the vendors, persons owning restaurants, residents, small business owners, taxi drivers, and also vulnerable groups, as Nicola mentioned. That's also a big focus for us. So we have included female farmers, female vendors, those who do craft and so forth in the national parks area, and also persons living with disabilities.
Okay, which focus groups have you worked with so far, and which other groups can you or can expect to get a call from you at this point in time for this project?
Okay, well, we've already contacted, I think a lot of them so far, and some of them showed up at the workshop. So we have targeted and spoken to some farmers, some fishermen, especially some female farmers. We also have spoken to the persons living with disabilities, that group as well. So, but really and truly, at this point in time, we would, just love to get feedback from persons living within the area. We have an open forum where they can contact us. They can check the website. So everything along the lines, the project is visible on the IHO website. So definitely, once you live in the area, we'd love to hear from you.
How long? What's the duration of this project? I mean, what window of opportunity do they have to jump in there and have their voices heard? And can they, if someone isn't comfortable with websites and such things, can they call up someone and you go chat with them? How does that all work?
Yes, we do have our information on the IHO website as well, which is, I believe, my number, and Nicola's number, contact information. So if they also don't want to talk, we also have our email addresses. But I know for the most part, especially a lot of the older stakeholders, they're like, I don't use WhatsApp. So, we go to them specifically, have that conversation, sit down by a melon. There was one farmer that I spoke with, and, we just chatted and, we had the conversation, just really get into the meat of the matter in terms of also the information that we need to support the project and also their thoughts on it, because these persons are living within that area for a number of years. So they have seen the degradation, they have seen it. There was one time when persons thought that climate change was a myth, but now it cannot be denied that there's definitely a change in the environment from the shorelines, erosion, saline intrusion, which is salt in the water, coral bleaching. I even spoke to a fisherman who said that he's been testing the water and he has noted a 1 degree change, in the sea surface temperature last year. So he's actually a little bit afraid to be checking it this year. And he said this is something that he thought he would never see. So, and also in terms of the fish count, the fish is smaller and it's also less. So these are, the climate change impacts are really getting up close and personal, I would say, and we want to capture all of it.
It's almost sounding a little bit scary, so
Scary, on the scary side,
yeah.
yes.
So
Yes,
is this
definitely.
project is about reporting or documenting, am I correct?
There is an aspect of documenting and reporting and also feedback. So the three essential goals are basically looking to identify what the environmental challenges are and how these ecosystems are being resilient. So how are we coping with it? What are we doing? We have at the workshops, we've also brought on maps to identify which areas specifically that we're having the challenges. So yes, we're having the coral bleaching. Where are we seeing it? Yes, we're having dumping in the mangroves. Where exactly? So that we can also support, along with our partners, of course, the national parks, in terms of mapping what are some of the areas. And national parks themselves do quite a bit of monitoring. We also one of the goals is to diversify and to strengthen livelihoods, as Nicola mentioned. So we do want to understand how it is they depend on these various ecosystems, the mangroves, the coral reef, the lands, the seagrasses. We want to know how do you depend on it and what are the challenges you have when, let's say, a hurricane hits or there's droughts. So we want to also, the third component is also a knowledge-based system so that we could actually gather information on what the ecosystem-based approaches will be. So what are the coping mechanisms as well for them in terms of sustainable livelihoods? If all your crops are damaged in a hurricane, what then do you do? So we want to hear from them, and we have been hearing, they have spoken. And so the project is supporting not only information gathering, but also feedback. And this is also to support adaptation mechanisms and a wider scale than a knowledge platform as well. And then support for these communities to be a bit more resilient. And I don't know if Nicola had something to
Well,
add,
yeah,
sorry.
Nicola, what have you learned from this project that surprised you? Share some information if you can that the average person out there will go, really? Any information at all?
I will just add just the one thing that they can also contact National Parks Authority for those in the area for outreach. So when you mention those who aren't website friendly or social media friendly, and so they might not be able to access, they will be familiar with national parks, so they can reach out to that team and they can contact us as well. So there are multiple platforms for them to access us without having to hunt down websites or social media. Uh, well, I think, there have been so many surprises, actually. I think so when you put a project together, you put the proposal forward, it can take up to 2 years for that proposal for the project to actually be implemented, even after approval. So in that process, from acceptance of the project to it actually being implemented, it was like about a 2-year period. And at the start of the project with coral reefs, for instance, with working with National Park and our conversations, they were quite optimistic. They had said that in national parks, because of the cooling water coming in, they've been able to replant corals and they were thriving, and they were optimistic. 6 months later, or less than, last summer, with the increased heat, done. The Caribbean is suffering from 99% coral bleaching. Is that scary? It's beyond scary. And because we're doing a regional project to our benefit, as Christina was mentioning, the knowledge platform, we can learn from each other. So we're hearing this in Jamaica, it's in Dominican Republic, it's in Antigua and Barbuda, it's all throughout the Caribbean. And none of us are knowing that. So therefore, unless you're really, this is why we have your show to be able to let people be aware, because they're not under the water. And do we understand this incredible impact? The smaller fish, this is where fish repopulate. and so many other things important to our ecosystem. So it's very scary. It's unpredictable because of this change. It was like we were more optimistic, and the increase in temperature this year. So even if they've been able to do some repopulation, will these new ones thrive in the increasing temperature? So it's something that we are already about 30 years ahead of what was the predicted outcomes from climate change. So that means it's 30 years before it was even predicted to occur. And so the biggest surprise, I think, for me is not just that, but how much we cannot predict the next. So what's come before is not really going to demonstrate what's going to happen next, because the rising temperatures and those changes is unprecedented. So we do need to be aware, not terrified. We cannot be terrified because it's not going to help us. That's why we need to be proactive. And projects like this allow us, I think, to be proactive. As Christine said, diversifying livelihoods, sustaining. And when we heard from the communities, one of the biggest things we heard was diversification. Sounds like a big word. Let's simplify it. It means just finding different ways for income. So if all your the storm comes and your crops are washed away, what else can you do? And that's what we're looking for. And at national parks, we heard one gentleman talk about how he's been adapting. And he talked about 5 different ways that he's making a living. And it might sound like, oh my goodness, I have to overwork. That's not what we're saying. It's just we do have to be more creative in our thinking. And he was able to kind of find ways to resource his talents. It was very impressive, gentleman. And I think that we are a service-oriented country, and it served us wonderfully. But as COVID showed us, we started talking about farming, different means of making an income. How do we sustain these kind of practices? And we need to keep thinking along those lines. And that's also another big thing that came out. The third thing I would say is how much people are concerned about waste and our illegal dumping, pollution, the mindsets of communities. I'm hearing it everywhere through multiple projects. I'm very happy to hear citizens are being more aware, but it's just the start. We really need the recent floods when we had the drains clogged from pollution and dumping. We need to really understand that impact on our ecosystems as well. If they're all so fragile now, we have to do everything we can as communities to protect our environments. And these are actions that we can take that we might think, oh, but what's the big deal? When we go on beaches, we see so much garbage. What if I leave one thing? It's just one thing, but it's not when it's a collective as a community. And our fragile systems, we need to be doing everything we can to protect them.
So someone's
mouthful.
Yeah, thanks. It was. That's okay. So Christina, someone's out there going, oh yeah, but it's just a cup that goes into the beach. Give us an idea of what damage certain items can do to this fragile ecosystem that Nicola's talking about. So some of the things that we find that people are doing or throwing out or whatever, give us an idea. What damage does it do?
So so waste management, one of the biggest challenges with, all over, but particularly, small island development states. So, it's yeah, as Nicola mentioned, it's clear we have dumping. Yeah, somebody might say, well, yeah, it's just a cup, but it may be a plastic cup. And then you have the issue of plastic, which is a whole entire challenge all on its own. So we'll be here all day, Barbara, if we were to start talking about plastics. But basically plastics, break down into microplastics, then just to break it down really small, then that gets into, the fish eat it. Sometimes you have turtles that are mistaking things like plastic bags for jellyfish, gets into their systems and whatnot. So that's like major damage. When I teach my kids, it's always about that as well. Every little action can cause a devastating reaction. And then you have things like I've seen refrigerators and different things in different parts of Antigua, as well as other islands as well, in the islands that I've worked in. So of course, those things are horrible. Ozone depleting substances, that there's a whole challenge with that as well, because I think in the Caribbean, we don't have these things in places yet to really, to really dispose of those things. So you find that people are just, leaking refrigerant gases just into the atmosphere, or, just carelessly throwing them into mangroves, which they call swamp, which is like dump land. Mangroves are not dumps, and there are still people who think like that, Barbara. So we want those persons to know that those are not dumping grounds. They are actually very important ecosystems, important for shoreline stability, for trapping silt, for birds, flora, and fauna. And as Nicola mentioned, this is a country that is tourism and service oriented. So we want to actually, we don't have a choice. We have to take care of our environment, not just to sustain it for the tourism product, but also for ourselves, because we have a lot of persons who also, depend on these mangroves, on the ecosystems and so forth for livelihood, for recreation. So we do have something called ecosystem services, where you have a value on these things. So if we were to put a value for mangroves, for what the services that they do, it would be X amount. And for coral reef, I don't know any numbers offhand, and it all depends on the condition of them, but we want persons to know that they serve a purpose. They're not just there, the fish are there doing nothing, and, the coral, all of those things, support, shoreline stability. And especially when we have extreme weather conditions, they play an additional role. So we want them to not. And there are quite a number of programs. I actually, there is a young lady who runs the organization called Good Humans, Joshua Nett, and they're doing quite a bit of work, as well as other organizations as well, in terms of, really getting to the bottom of this, the solid waste management issue. And then, of course, hotels have to also play their role in terms of their sewage systems and so forth. So they do things like water monitoring and what's not, to ensure that, they're not breaching any protocols and damaging the environment. So everybody can play their part. Everybody has a part to play. Very important part. No part is too small, or it's like, it's just a cup. I'm just picking up one cup. Pick up the cup.
Yes, for sure.
Pick up the cup.
Ladies, it's 8:33. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back. And actually, I want to talk more about plastics, if you can. So because people don't necessarily understand it. So let's dig deep into the plastics, which aren't going anywhere. So we'll be right back with both of you in a few minutes, okay?
At Quartz Optical, two are better than one. Be always ready for the occasions with a second pair of eyewear. Find your fit with a pair. Get 50% off on all men's frames and sunglasses, plus 30% off all other purchases. Ray-Ban, Armani, Converse, Vogue, and much more. Get that frame today. Shop with no cash and pay later. Plus, you can book your eye examination appointment online today on www.quartzoptical.com. Only at Quartz Optical. Value you can see.
Getting treatment within 60 minutes can reduce disability. That's why it's important to know the signs and call 911 right away if you think you or someone else is having a stroke. The signs are sudden numbness or weakness of face, arm, or leg, especially on one side of the body. Sudden confusion, trouble speaking, or trouble understanding speech. Sudden trouble seeing in one or both eyes. Sudden trouble walking, dizziness, or loss of balance or coordination. Sudden severe headache with no known cause. If any of these signs are shown, 911 should be called immediately. It can happen to anyone at any time. Learn the signs. Act in time. This message was brought to you by Nicola Bird Medical Center and this station.
Hi, children. This one is just for you. It's the
ECCB Children's Connection Program.
This Saturday on this station.
Come, listen.
Join me, Auntie Abby, and my co-host,
London Charles, and other children just like me, ages 5 to 12, to listen and participate in exciting stories,
powerful lessons,
mock quizzes,
and wise words.
Also, win prizes and surprises.
Awesome.
ECCB Children's Connection Program.
Make sure you check Observer Radio 91.1 FM this Saturday at 9:30 a.m. for this exciting program designed just for you.
Hey you, it's time to get excited because Newsco Observer Limited is bringing you a raffle with prizes that will blow your mind. Picture this, you could win 6 Inter-Caribbean airline tickets, a refrigerator, television, stove, microwave, freezer, blender, fans, vacuum cleaner, other household appliances, and more. By participating in this raffle, you're also supporting our equipment upgrade, ensuring Newsco Observer Radio and Hits FM stay on the air. Tickets are only $20, but you can get a book of 10 for only $180. Get yours today from the Observer Radio office, Raymond Shire Hardware, Flower World, U2 Soup from Valerie Gonzalez Barrero, or on the ticketing app. The draw is going to be held on Juve morning, Monday 5th August at 10 a.m. on Reckless Street. So don't miss out. Grab your tickets now and get ready to win big with Newsco Observer Limited.
This is Observer Radio.
Your voice counts. Your questions are answered. This is Observer AM.
Welcome back to Observer AM. We're chit-chatting with Dr. Nicola Bird and Christina Young. We're talking about the environment. We're talking about all sorts of things. Nicola, why don't we just ban plastics? I mean, is that something?
Barbara, you're talking to the converted. I would think that would be fantastic. There's actually, outside of Antigua and Barbuda, there is a global movement towards this on an international level. By the end of the year, there is they're looking to do form a global treaty towards addressing plastic pollution, plastic management, and banning of plastics. IHO also has a consultancy in terms of addressing some of our issues in terms of plastics. So we have been doing a national assessment in terms of our plastic waste management and recommendations and how we can improve it, as well as adding to the global database on terms of plastic management and plastic inventory that is looking to be implemented in the next couple of years. So I agree that the problem is that there's several layers. One, that plastic is very cheap. And so even when we were talking to many of the people involved in either plastic, using of plastic in terms of companies, or plastic management in terms of our government agencies, one retail said that going towards using paper bags costs them 10 times more than plastics. So that's one of the issues. And we have become so structured in terms of using plastic bottles and plastic. We have to do a whole mental shift and social shift, cultural and economic shift in terms of prioritizing not what's cheaper, but because it's cheaper, it's more accessible. I mean, back in our day, we know that people used to just take boxes, gather their groceries, take them home. When I was growing up early in my life, and I'm aging myself, but there was no plastic bottles. We didn't have those kind of things. We would reuse a glass bottle and put water in it and then go about our business. So we do have those memories. So we do have to return to previous practices. And Christine talked about microplastics. At one department, for instance, I mentioned we've banned single-use plastics, but we still have those small grocery bags, and everywhere I go, those are being used. And so, why is that not being addressed? That was one of my questions. And because everywhere I go, if I'm buying fruits or vegetables at the side of the road and trying to shove them in the plastic. They're saying, keep the plastics, I have my bag, and they keep trying to shove it my way. And I'm like, keep it. But people are using those and replacing with these small plastics. So we do have to address that. But one person said, oh, but they break down. And I said, no, they don't. They seem to disintegrate into smaller microplastics, but they're still impacting the environment. So they're thinking, oh, plastics are breaking down. I'm saying, so there's that misconception. I said they're not biodegradable. They're an oil derivative with all those toxins going right back into our environment, right back into our soil, into our bodies. We now know there's studies where these microplastics are part of our cells at this moment. And we don't even know that impact on health because that's quite new. So I want to give Christine a chance to talk because, of course, as Christine said, we could go on and on and on about this, but the impact is considerable. The ocean is full of plastics, and we need to find now we're moving towards recycling, reusable, upcycling. I'm seeing in developing country or developed countries making clothes out of plastic, but it still doesn't solve the problem. We need to address the user end. And it needs to be a global initiative. We need to have a global movement. I saw one person say that she approached Amazon, the change.org, and they are committed to not using plastics for protective in their packaging, which will reduce their plastic use by 35% or more. Which is a start, but it's still not enough because it's still increasing. So I think, just very quickly to answer your questions, why not ban? We need humans, people, globally, nationals, and it needs to be a global movement for us to say, let's do something about this. Let's go to compostables. If we use compostable bags, they will break down. And by economies of scale, if we shift, but the more that the community and people make that demand and understand that, the more there will be change.
I had an interesting experience. For the last couple of weeks, I've spent a lot of time at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium, enjoying that wonderful game called cricket that I absolutely love, And do you know the only thing I could carry my drinks in was plastics? So it was a plastic-only zone, basically. Imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an ICC thing, I believe. And we understand, or, we hear why, the whole idea that if you're using a metal thing, you can throw it at somebody or, in glasses, whatever. But I found it interesting, especially considering the conversation we're having right now, that in 2024, I was told that I had to, and I hadn't used that many plastic bottles in ages, and I kept feeling really guilty about this because it's no longer my norm. Yeah, well, I had my bottle ready and stuff, but they told me I might knock down somebody with the bottle. And I'm thinking, no, I won't. I just have water in my ice. But there we go. So how do we, an enormous organization like that, ICC, how do we get them to think about the impact that something as wonderful as cricket just did some real damage to our environment? It just doesn't seem to quite to add up. Christine,
No.
You want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on what both of you were saying, yes, a lot of people do and don't get me wrong and don't get us wrong in terms of recycling is great, beach cleanups are great, but they are really plaster solutions. If I would like to put that out there, not to ruffle any feathers or anything, but we really do have to get to the user end, to the source. We want to get at sustainable procurement, so as I always say, from cradle to grave, you have to think about where does my product start and where does it end? Now, Nicola mentioned compostable and, things breaking down. There are a lot of companies now that have, this is recyclable, and a lot of them are into, let's say, greenwashing, which is a false sense of security that, what I'm doing is responsible. But you can actually, I want users to understand that you can do your research on this, right? You can research. As an auditor, I have to research all products. A company tells me biodegradable. You just go online, you research it. Sometimes it's an eco label, so it's actually certified where you can get information on that. So you yourself as a consumer, you have that responsibility from the time you go to Epicurean to First Choice, wherever it is that you go, you can make that decision, right, in terms of purchasing. I also want to speak to the hotels as well. The hotels have a humongous responsibility because if you go to any majority of hotel rooms, especially all inclusives, you would have a lot of bottled water. So you get like in a room per day, you probably generate minimum 6 bottles of water. And then with this additional heat, it's going to be more and more, right? So I just want to take the opportunity to recognize one hotel that I know that's best practice in terms of the plastic pollution and reduction, which is Galley Bay. So what Galley Bay does, as far as I recall, and it's not to be corrected, but I know that they have reusable bottles for their guests. So the guests come in, they have nicely branded Galley Bay bottles. So what they do is they just walk around the property. They have something called rehydration stations. So at these rehydration stations, you can actually go and you can fill up your water and your ice. No, you can't fill up the alcohol in the fountain, but you can go to the bar. Now, I don't know if the bartender or the bar manager may have some other side to the story in terms of his food costs and beverage costs, but you get the point. And then they go home with a souvenir and they go home with a very good feeling that, I've been to an island that is, reducing their plastics, they're being responsible with their waste, right? So yeah, it is definitely a big issue, but we also have a big role to play as consumers. And as Nicola also mentioned, the demand is a big thing. If we decide that we're not buying it, or you have communications with your suppliers. I remember at one point in time, I had visited Yao, and in having a conversation with them and telling them, well, this client wants to go green, they want to be more responsible, and they had glass bottles, which you could, these deposit refund schemes and exchanges and things like that. So, but we have to have the conversations with the suppliers. The suppliers won't just come and say, well, we have all these green things. You have to let them know, listen, we are making this change in our organization. We want to know what options you have. Tell us, we'll work with you. And that's really how it has to work right now, because we can't wait as much as we would love for it to be, mandated and law and so forth. But we do have, options and, things that we can exercise. We have that power to exercise in our, daily consumption, daily purchases and so forth. So, yeah.
So is education?
But we can spend all day for sure on.
Yeah, only about 5 more minutes left for us. But is education the key, Nicola, at this point in time? I mean, and if so, where does that fit into the project that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, well, awareness building is key for us to be aware of what our choices are. I mean, we do have to talk about economics when we're talking about this as well. Like if you're struggling for survival, if you have economic challenge, you're going to go for what is cheapest, what is most available. We totally understand that. And that's why if we can, and so some of these things might seem more costly and more expensive. And so what we need to make things, one, yes, create awareness, but also availability. We have to have solutions that are available and accessible. Because if we don't have accessibility, then it would only be the elite making the changes, but those who don't have that access cannot, even if they have the will. So we do have to consider these vulnerabilities. And so that's why it really is a collective, all hands on deck. And I say that. So yes, we definitely need to build awareness, make changes accessible to all communities, not just some, and make and let everyone know how we can be positioned to create change. So I think we say that there's a problem, but we also have to show what our solutions are. And so in this project, that is what we're doing, because when we are going and getting that information, for instance, from the communities, we are a part of the project is providing training in sustainable livelihoods or diversified livelihoods. And so we're doing the two-pronged problem and looking for solutions as well, and accessible solutions for the most vulnerable groups in particular.
And then we come into the, well, okay, share a little story. A grandmother told me that she was so ashamed, as she put it, because she's walking along with her grandchild, and she did what I suppose she does, because she said they were walking past the bush, and she had a little something in her hand, and so she just kind of threw it, and as she put it wasn't where people could see it. And the grandchild said, "Grandma, you're littering!" And loud enough for everybody around to hear, I suppose, because little children don't speak softly. And Grandma was shamed. So are the little children our target at this point in time? And if so, do your projects get into the schools, and do you how do you filter that information to them? Because I personally believe that, we're all the future, we're all the present, but the young ones, if they can shame Grandma.
Yeah. We do. We do have IHO Nature Rangers, and it's an environmental youth group that we help to register and form. But our goal is for them to manage it themselves and take ownership for it, which is what they're doing. So we have about 60 of them. We're doing 2 after-school programs, not in the northern area, but we are planning to do that in the northern area, which National Park area, into the new school year. And the IHO Nature Rangers, that's the whole goal, to build awareness, to find solutions, and to address their population. I do think absolutely we do need to start with the younger generation, and we're actively doing everything we can to empower them and take ownership for finding solutions. But I personally think it's all hands on deck. Like I said, it has to come from everywhere, because our situation, as we saw most recently, like I said, I mentioned the flooding, how that impacted. That's not going to stop. So we can't just wait for the young people to figure this out. We don't have 50 years. We don't have the next 20 years. But as much comprehensive action that we can take in awareness building and programs like this, and just continuing to talk and not stop the conversation. That's what we need to do. We have to keep going. And yes, as an organization, we're definitely dedicated to addressing these very significant and important issues and working from everywhere we can.
And someone's written in and said, the ladies are speaking about pollution under the water. What about the pollution in the air? I think the person is addressing issues of down at the dump. A fire has been burning now for almost 2 weeks. So the gist of what they're saying is that they send their garbage down to the dump, and then pollution comes back to them. I don't know if either of you want to touch that. Or
what I will say, that's why we need to have as much as we can to divert things from the landfill. So the landfill is obviously just, extended. So by us reducing our waste, using less plastics, managing what we're purchasing, so our actions do contribute. So we can't just say, let's just throw garbage away and the government's responsible. Yes, and if a manager, we understand all of that, but we also play a role in how much garbage we're using and how much we can reduce our waste as much as we can, and think in terms of our waste reduction.
Okay.
Christine, I know you want to say something.
Yes.
Okay. We're wrapping up.
I was just gonna just to agree with you, and I think as well, so the first line of defense is just reducing. One has to actually go to the landfill, and I believe I know a couple of years ago, I think the government may have been in some talks in terms of like an incinerator and all of that. So even because landfills, people sometimes don't understand that landfills have a capacity, right? Landfills are actually it's really scientific how they operate in terms of leaching, separation of waste. So people have the false impression, or I guess they're not aware that you just throw it anywhere and that kind of thing, but it's actually supposed to be a very calculated sort of operation where you have certain types of waste. There's a time frame in which the landfill can operate, and then you're supposed to switch over, change locations, etc. So and we're, as small island developing states, we're actually kind of maxed out for the most part in that area. So that even that's a more urgent call to, reduce whatever it is that we send there, to prevent those kind of things, environmental as well as the health hazards associated with landfills as well.
Someone's written
we
in.
really do. Yeah, so we just adding very quickly that as when I talk about that, we need a voice as a community. We need voices to really push for recycling programs, including composting and community, because we can reduce our waste incredibly through composting actions. And if we can include those in the schools, include those in the homes, and really have a voice as a community, because we need to divert our waste. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah,
okay. Just a quick comment on the board. Someone says, "Good morning, ladies. Good listening to this program. And I think no effort should be spared. But why is the grant program that sponsors the plastic recycling through Department of Environment not continued by the government?" I think that's just a question that's out there. Maybe we leave that one alone. But again, it's someone being aware and creating more awareness. And I appreciate that. Ladies, I want to ask you each just to give us a minute, a wrap-up minute, so to speak. It's been great having you both on the Zoom platform. Hopefully we can continue these sort of discussions more often. So, Christina, you first in 60 seconds. Just give us some closing thoughts that you want us to have with us.
Okay, well, I just want to thank you, Barbara, for having us on the show this morning, and just to encourage the listeners out there that and especially related to the project that we're doing, that your input is very important, your thoughts, your experiences. So feel free to pop in, as Nicola mentioned, to the national parks and let us know, get in contact with us so that we can work together to really make some improvements in this area and support livelihoods and support ecosystems within that area. So, and then for everyone else, of course, on the matter with waste, you are the consumer, you have the choice, and you can make a difference. Thank you.
And making a difference can be as simple as planting a few more trees. It's
Yes.
fruit season, so I'm encouraging everybody, when you eat the sugar apple and there are 50 seeds in there, throw them into a pile of dirt and see what grows. At the end of the summer, try to see if you can plant at least 50 different trees and distribute them and find some vacant land somewhere and plant them. Dr. Nicola Bird, you have the final say this morning in 60 seconds. Tell us what we need to know.
So first, thank you, Barbara, for having us and being so insightful. And for more information on this project and any other projects, our website is www.ihoab. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Integrated Health Outreach or IHOAB as well. And so check us out for all the programs that we have and the different projects and different initiatives that we have. And we can all play a part, all hands on deck. Let's all get involved. Let's not just have a voice, but take action to save our environment and our island.
Thank you both very much. Have a great morning.